evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Thursday, April 10th. U.S. President Donald Trump shared on Truth Social yesterday that he has authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered 10% reciprocal tariff during this period. Mr. Trump also raised the tax rate on Chinese imports to 125%. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told reporters that the pause was due to other countries seeking negotiations.
No, it's because because of the large number of inbounds. We've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause. Look, it's all the president's decision, and the president had a level in mind to raise the China tariffs, and then he had the 3-month pause in mind, and we were discussing the exact wording. Sorry? Of course.
It's the president's decision.
It's the president's decision. It was the president's decision to wait until today. And again, as I've said in the past, no one creates leverage for himself like President Trump.
About an hour later, Mr. Trump told reporters that he pulled back on many tariffs because people were getting yippy and afraid.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents. They wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. It's for a short period of time, but we made $2 billion. We're making now $2 billion a day. And somebody had to do it. Roger actually said it. Charles Schwab was here a little while ago, one of the great financial people, and he said he's been waiting for 40 years for somebody to do what I did over the last month. And if you didn't do it, you wouldn't have a country. It wouldn't be sustainable.
European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen announced today that the European Union will pause its countermeasures against U.S. tariffs after President Donald Trump temporarily lowered his just-imposed hefty duties. The bloc was due to launch counter tariffs on about 21 billion euros of U.S. imports starting next Tuesday. It is still assessing how to respond to U.S. car tariffs and the broader 10% levy still in place. In Europe, Eurozone government bond yields surged, and markets dialed back expectations from European central bank rate cuts following Mr. Trump's latest announcement. U.S. stocks are falling a bit after a giant gain yesterday as Wall Street stays cautious about a trade war that has eased slightly but still poses a risk on the economy. The S&P 500 was down 2.3% this morning, a day after surging 9.5%. Even better than expected, a report on inflation wasn't enough to get stocks to add to their gains from the day before, including the S&P 500's third best since 1940. While speaking to reporters yesterday, Donald Trump touched on the stock market increase following his tariff pause.
I didn't know it would have that kind of an impact, but it's, I think they have the biggest increase in the history of the stock market. That's pretty good. You're almost, if you keep going, you're going to be back to where it was 4 weeks ago. But it was a sick market 4 weeks ago, because this trade was sick. It was only a question of time. I don't blame the tariffs. I think the tariffs just sort of magnified what was happening. It was sick. Biden allowed these people to get away with murder. Biden allowed China to just take advantage of us. We had like $1 trillion deficit with China, $1 trillion deficit. So that was going to only be a matter of time. I think the tariffs brought it out faster and they magnified the problem. But I think this was a problem that existed far beyond tariffs. This was a systemic problem, and we're going to cure that problem. And maybe to a large extent we have, because we've revealed it, and we've revealed it very strongly.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said today that he is not engaging with Chinese officials on tariffs, nor is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. However, he said that Donald Trump expects to have a conversation with Chinese President Xi Jinping.
I am not engaging with them. Scott has not engaged with them. And the president, he does expect to have conversations with President Xi, but that is between them. If we get a contact, we will just pass it to the president. And this is really about him. He has said publicly that maybe they don't really know the best way to go through. But the answer really is it's a phone call between the two leaders of these giant countries that they can work it out together. But it's really, that's what's going to happen, and that's what we all expect to happen.
And Mr. Lutnick appeared to threaten more tariffs on Canada if the country doesn't back down on its current counter tariffs.
No, the president was very clear. The sector tariffs, those on steel and aluminum and those on autos, are going to remain as he put them out. So that is unchanged, right? What he said was the reciprocal tariffs would go to 10%. And if Canada decides to keep their retaliatory move, which I would suggest, having watched how it went with China, would be a really, really bad choice. Europe put out some retaliatory tariffs, but they said they don't start for a couple of weeks, right? And I think what's going to happen is they are going to be pushed out for the 90 days so they have time to negotiate with the president without having something hanging over their head. So that's certainly my expectation, that all these countries will realize, let's just wait, let's go negotiate, let's see what we can accomplish together. So Canada needs to understand things are changing, okay? Things are changing. We made a deal with them. We put out tariffs on autos that protected their auto parts industry. They should understand that that was a balanced move by the president with respect to Canada and Mexico, right? You see how Mexico has dealt with it? Mexico's been restrained and been pragmatic. And her ratings in Mexico are 75% positive. Right now, Canada, they're in an election, so you never know. Maybe it's all election, bluster, but we don't know. But the fact is, if they put those tariffs on, we're going to be talking in the Oval Office, and he's going to respond. So I hope they choose to refrain.
Following Mr. Lutnick's comments urging Canada to remove its counter tariffs on American goods, the official White House social media account reinforced the message with a post in all capital letters reading, quote, "Do not retaliate and you will be rewarded." And while in Saskatoon, Liberal leader Mark Carney responded to Mr. Lutnick's warning. Mr. Carney indicated that counter tariffs are still a key part of Canada's strategy, despite the U.S. threatening another round of retaliation.
Is we're going to fight, we're going to protect, and we're going to build. Here. We're going to build. So we're going to fight. We fight the Americans with what they understand. They understand money, they understand lawyers, and they understand Fox News. So we put counter tariffs on the Americans. We put counter tariffs on the Americans. So money, American, number one, money. We have put counter tariffs on the Americans. Counter tariffs to have maximum impact there and minimum impact here. Lawyers. We got a lot of lawyers. We're taking them to court, in their courts, in the international courts, in the NAFTA court, and we will win those lawsuits. And Fox News, well, we got Doug Ford all over Fox News. He's making the point. He's good. He's good. He's good, Doug. But the court, the next thing we do, okay, fight, yes. But what we have to do is we have to protect our workers. Protect our workers. Think of the steel workers. The steel workers here in Saskatchewan. Steel workers in Saskatchewan. The auto workers in Ontario. The farmers and fishers. The potash workers. And we're taking, some would take the money from the tariffs and they want to cut taxes. I won't say who that is, but you can probably guess, because his answer to everything is cut taxes. We're taking every dollar from these tariffs, and we're giving it back to the workers who are most affected by them and the enterprises. We are protecting our own.
And in a post last night, Mr. Carney said that the 90-day tariff pause for other countries is a welcome reprieve. He said that he and Mr. Trump agree that the next prime minister will start negotiating with the U.S. on a new economic and security relationship immediately following the federal election. Mr. Carney said that Mr. Trump has also indicated that the U.S. will start negotiating with a number of other countries and that he believes those talks, quote, will likely result in a fundamental restructuring of the global trading system. All right, stay tuned. Up next, Pierre Poilievre promises harsh penalties for repeat offenders committing serious crimes. After that, our correspondent Wyatt Sharp sat down with John Rustad. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre started his rally in Brampton, Ontario on Wednesday by addressing Mr. Trump's actions. He described the decision to leave tariffs on Canada as the latest disrespect by President Trump of our country.
I have to address today's latest disrespect by President Trump of our country. While President Trump announced a 90-day pause on tariffs for dozens of countries, he kept those tariffs in place on Canada. Take that in for a moment. Almost every country in the world got a pause on American tariffs, but not us, America's best friend. Our steel workers, aluminum workers, auto workers, lumber workers hit again. This after Prime Minister Carney boasted that he had a, quote, productive phone call with the president. He said that he had made progress with the president. What progress? What progress do the auto workers in Brampton and Windsor and elsewhere in Canada today see? Now, to be clear, I'm not blaming Prime Minister Carney for President Trump's tariffs. These tariffs are uncalled for and unjustified. And no one can control this president. But that's precisely the point. Prime Minister Carney is running his entire campaign on a false promise that he can control the president through magical, masterful negotiating techniques. Well, we know now that that is not true. Nobody can control this president.
Mr. Poilievre also said that while he would move quickly to negotiate with Mr. Trump, he would also focus on what he can control.
And while I will move quickly to negotiate an end to tariffs with protections for Canadian sovereignty as quickly as possible, we need to focus on what we can control. And this is what we can control, my friends. We need to reverse the disastrous liberal economic policies of the last 10 years that made us so dependent on the Americans in the first place. So the choice in this election is not, as Mr. Carney would ask you, to overlook an entire decade of rising costs and crime and falling economy that is under the thumb of the Americans simply because he promises that somehow he's a master negotiator. No, he can't control any of that.
And the Conservative leader is also promising harsh penalties for repeat offenders committing serious crimes. He pledged that those offenders would be sentenced to a minimum of 10 years in prison and be ineligible for bail, probation, parole, or house arrest.
Not only will we repeal liberal catch and release laws, we will carry out the biggest crackdown on crime in Canadian history. And we will do it by passing the 3 strikes, you're out law. 3 strikes, you're out means that anyone convicted of 3 serious offenses will be ineligible thereafter for bail, probation, parole, or house arrest. And they will serve a minimum of 10 years behind bars, a maximum of life imprisonment, and they will have to earn their release even still. We will designate such offenders as dangerous offenders, meaning they cannot be released until they have proven that they are no longer a danger to society. Under my watch, the The only way for repeat offenders to obtain their freedom will be through spotless behavior and clean drug tests during a lengthy minimum prison sentence with earned release, dependent on making real progress in improving their lives, such as learning a trade or upgrading their education. They will also have to take drug tests to prove that they are clean.
During Canada's Strong and Free conference today, the leader of the BC Conservative Party, John Rustad, delivered a speech addressing how important it is to stay united as a country and about the large impact the federal elections outcome will have on Canada.
And this, to me, is something that we need to all be thinking about. Why are we not thinking of ourselves as Canadians? We have all these trade barriers amongst the provinces, and each province and each region has its different issues they're trying to push forward, and they're saying, oh, we don't care about the other issues. We've forgotten who we are as a country and what brought us together. And I think it's time we actually start thinking once again as Canadians. I mean, with what's going on south of the border and what Donald Trump has done, it's sparked a little bit of this nationalism, and I don't think that's a bad thing. We should be thinking about how we tear down our barriers and support each other. We should be thinking about how we actually renew Confederation. And I am really, quite frankly, concerned in this next election with what's going on that we will see alienation in this country, unlike we've seen before.
Our correspondent Wyatt Sharp sat down with Mr. Rustad to discuss how Canada can move forward during such uneasy times.
I'm here with John Rustad, leader of the BC Conservative Party. John, you gave a speech earlier here just at the Canada Strong and Free conference. I'm curious, we're in a federal election campaign. There's a lot of talk about tariffs, about what the election could mean for various provinces, certainly British Columbia being one of them. From your perspective, how can we kind of move forward during such turbulent times while still staying united as a country?
You know, that's actually a very good question, because I actually look at what has happened from south of the border for the tariffs. It gives us an opportunity to actually start thinking of ourselves as a nation. And it gives us a chance to think about how we take down our interior trade barriers so that we can see goods flowing back and forth, how we look at actually utilizing our resources, but reimagining who we are as Canada. And I think it's a good opportunity to start having that conversation. Of course, the big challenge we'll have, because we're in the middle of an election campaign, there's lots of positioning and stuff that happens. But I think it's time for a vision of, a prosperous, strong, and free Canada, and how we can achieve that. And that's what I'm really hoping to see come out of this election.
And British Columbia is an example, too, of a province that started, with the Conservatives having more support than they usually would in the polls, certainly. And then it seems as if once Mark Carney got elected as leader, a lot of the NDP support then transitioned over to the Liberals. Is that a sign that maybe people in British Columbia are looking to Mark Carney as the person who can deal with some of, these financial problems that we're facing? And how do the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre reposition themselves when they only have, a few short weeks to do that?
It's an interesting question, and you look at the breakdown, and ultimately, particularly for the younger generation, for ethnic minorities, for a lot of people that are really under 60, they're looking about how to build a future, and they're looking for that hope and vision. And I think they are tending to lean more towards the Conservatives because they see that. I think the older vote tends to be more looking for more tradition, more things like healthcare and these types of issues. So there's a lot of issues at play, and I think what people need to embrace is how do we make sure that as a country we're going to be able to be successful. And this is a little off base from what you asked, but as a country we've seen 0.14% growth per GDP per capita for the last decade, every year. It's absolutely insane to think that we would accept this. We haven't seen this kind of growth, this kind of poor growth, since the Great Depression. By comparison, all of the OECD nations are 10 times our growth. The Americans are 18 times our growth from what we are. And so that slow growth has meant a huge decline, and I think everybody should see that as a concern, particularly when you're needing, whether it's healthcare services or other types of things. We should be looking at how do we improve our quality of life and services. That's where I'm hoping people will be. And in British Columbia, what we've seen is a lot of people are worried about what that future is, and so they tend to gravitate more towards what they know as opposed to what may be coming. And so that's where I really hope we'll be able to see a significant difference.
And just lastly here, before we conclude on the tariffs specifically, because Donald Trump has changed his mind quite a bit on this, even just recently changing his mind again. But so have some of our Canadian political leaders. You look to Mark Carney and what he's been saying. He is an advocate for retaliatory tariffs, but he also said in a press conference recently that Canada must understand that we come secondary to kind of the amount of trade that the United States produces. So how can we kind of balance that equation, you know, the need for retaliatory tariffs, but also understanding that the U.S. has a much bigger trade market than we do?
Yeah, that's a good question. When you're the small trading partner and you're in a trade fight, ultimately you're going to lose. And so we need to make sure we push back on the things that we should and we need to push back on. But we also need to grow opportunities for us to create a position of strength. We are in a position of weakness as Canadians. We're not taking advantage of our resources. We are not taking advantage of our natural geography and the opportunities we have across our country. We are not diversifying like we should with other jurisdictions. And so we're very dependent on the Americans. If we were to strengthen our economy, get things going, have that diversification of trade, deal with our barriers, then when we're sitting down with the Americans, we're now coming at them with a position of strength because we have other options. And so we have to find that balance, pushing back, making sure that we carry on, as reliable relationship as we can with the Americans, but at the same time understand that our future is in our hands by diversifying and growing our economy and taking advantage of the resources we have. That is how I think we have to deal with Trump.
Okay, we'll leave it there. John Rustad from the BC Conservatives, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me here today.
Again, that was our contributor, Wyatt Sharp. Stay with us. We'll have more news right after the break. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says that Canadians feel like they're trapped on a roller coaster they don't want to be on. This is because of Mr. Trump's whirlwind of tariff threats. Mr. Singh said it's becoming clear that the only way off this roller coaster is becoming less dependent on the U.S. by buying Canadian and building more Canadian products.
It's clear with the roller coaster that we feel like we're trapped in right now. There's tariffs and there's pauses, there's impacts and then there's pullbacks. We're going through a chaos created by Donald Trump, and Canadians are fed up with it. They're fed up with the ups and downs and the uncertainty. I know a lot of Canadians are watching every day and saying, what's going to happen next? I think more than ever what this is making very clear is that we got to find our way off this roller coaster. We got to build Canadian, buy Canadian, using Canadian workers. We have to become more independent as an economy, less dependent on the United States. We've got to build more of what we need in Canada and find ways to separate ourselves from the chaos being created by Donald Trump, because it's a roller coaster ride that we do not want to be on. And for folks out there that are wondering what's going to happen next and every day kind of in fear of the next announcement from Donald Trump, I just want you to know New Democrats are committed to always fighting for you.
And in that same press briefing, Mr. Singh said comments made by a Saskatchewan Party MLA who called him a terrorist while at the provincial's legislature are concerning. Mr. Singh said he'd like to know what happened in this MLA's life for her to say that.
There is an MLA from Saskatchewan that I've learned now has referred to me as a terrorist. I'm an adult. I'm a leader of a national party. I'm an elected official. I'm a lawyer. I don't care that they said that about me. It's not about me. But I am worried about why someone would say that. Like, this is an MLA, someone that's an elected official, respected member of their community, a former teacher. Like, what would make someone say something like that? This is, I'm assuming, a very educated person. On a quick Google, you know that this is completely false. Like, I am a lawyer in good standing. I've passed the bar. I've been called to the bar. I have high security clearance at the federal level. Like, this is clearly a lie. But what's happened in this MLA's life for them to say that about me? Like, why would they go to that point? Why would they lie in that way? But I am worried about what a kid in the classroom where this MLA was a teacher, what that kid would have gone through to have maybe they were made to feel like they were a threat, that they were someone that people should be suspicious of just because they look different. That's really what it says when you call someone something like that. You're saying that someone is a danger, someone is a threat just because they look different. And when did we get to a point in our society that was okay?
The MLA, Raquel Hilbert, backtracked after calling Mr. Singh a terrorist and sent an email on Wednesday apologizing for her remarks. Liberal leader Mark Carney took his promise of making Canada an energy superpower to the heart of Canada's oil industry on Wednesday, becoming the second party leader in 3 days to promise to speed up the review process to greenlight major national energy projects. And Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre made a one project, one review promise at a campaign stop in northwest British Columbia on Monday.
My government, my Liberal government, recognizes this. And if elected, we will act on it. Because under my leadership, it's time to build big time. Today, I'm announcing a comprehensive new approach to make Canada the world's leading energy superpower. And it's an approach that is defined by three objectives. Energy security, first. This means using Canadian energy to displace imported energy, including energy imported from the United States. Secondly, trade diversification, to widen our partners, and again, to reduce our reliance on the U.S. And thirdly, long-term competitiveness. To build the strongest economy in the G7, we need to develop both clean energy and the lowest carbon conventional energy.
Canada Powered by Women released new research showing overwhelming support from engaged women for prioritizing Canada's energy and economic independence to strengthen national security and prosperity. The latest survey conducted by Leger shows a significant year-over-year increase in support of these priorities among engaged women across the province. It comes as the national conversation about Canada's ability to withstand tariffs and an uncertain relationship with the U.S. continues to dominate discussion across the country. The survey, representing the views of 6.7 million Canadians, identifies as engaged women, shows 89% support reducing reliance on U.S. trade, while 85% support building pipelines and refining capacity within Canada. We're now joined by the CEO of Canada Powered by Women to discuss the new research. Tracy, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, based on your research, why do you think there is more support from women engaging in the prioritizing of Canada's energy and economic independence?
Well, there's definitely a lot of focus on a national conversation around our economic sovereignty, around tariffs and everything that's been happening from the US. And it's definitely elevating a discussion that women, engaged women across Canada, have been having actually for a couple of years. But now there's a real heightened awareness that we need to do some things differently. And energy is something women are proud of and that we need to be maximizing our responsible development with.
And do you mind breaking down the survey and if there were any qualifications that the surveyed women had to meet?
For sure. The whole concept of an engaged woman is one that's actually somewhat homogenous because women are across the country who are just really curious, super informed. And the characteristics are really about consuming information, taking in the news, really having an active eye on politics and policy, and specifically connecting the dots around a thriving energy sector and a thriving economy.
And how have the responses changed year over year?
Well, what we're seeing right now is there's always been consistent top three priorities, and those have been a successful economy, which is, prosperity and jobs. Then it's been energy security, which is affordable and reliable energy. And the third priority has consistently been the environment and reducing emissions. But what we're seeing now is definitely the economy and energy security is really eclipsing everything else. It doesn't mean that women don't care about the environment, but right now they want balanced policy that's really going to develop our resources so that we can have the kind of security and economic prosperity that women want for themselves and their families, but for Canadians.
And how much do you think that Donald Trump has impacted opinions in Canada?
Well, I definitely think there's been an impact there because there's now a national conversation that's happening about energy that perhaps wasn't happening even 6 months ago, or maybe even 3 months ago. But women have been having this conversation for a while now, but now it's more out in the open and more prominent. And we know too from our research that women are actually proud of our resources and feel that we can export, diversify our markets, and really bring wealth to our country.
Now, with this research being released, do you think that it's going to inspire more women to continue to stay engaged in these topics and inspire them to want to do the research to keep up to date with what's going on?
I definitely think so, but though I can share that our audience has grown significantly over 3 years. So this is not a flavor of the day discussion. It's one that's been happening for a couple years. But I think what engaged women, what will motivate them to be involved and continue to be involved is policymakers listening to what their expectations are for sound energy policy and not just having policy that's aligned with issues, but having policy that actually executes and executes rapidly because engaged women see energy independence and economic independence as urgent.
And what do you think is holding back resource expansion if these projects are broadly accepted and supported?
I think that obviously we're in the middle of an election and there's so much on the radar of all policymakers and parties right now regarding energy policy. And so I would say that right now we just need that conversation to continue. And we're pretty optimistic that whatever government is in place, we're going to see a move towards energy and resource development in Canada.
And how do you think that these views could impact the election?
Well, as far as the election goes, we're just happy that this is a conversation that everybody is having. And so for us, I think the devil's in the details, and women want to understand the specifics of policy. So I think you have to look at the details and understand what aligns with you and what you would like to see for your priorities. We know engaged women's priorities are that they want to see energy independence and they want to see that we basically increase our capacity with infrastructure and also make regulation less complex so we can get these projects going and start developing our resources not responsibly but also exporting and diversifying our markets with Europe and Asia.
And in regard to energy independence, is there a party leader that's focusing on that a little bit more, that's making these engaged women kind of lead more in that direction?
I think all policy leaders are focusing on energy right now, which is a positive thing. And we're just really happy that that conversation is happening across the board with everyone.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you.
Coming up, more news right after this. Former Michigan Congressman Pete Hoekstra has been confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the new United States ambassador to Canada. He will become America's top diplomat in Ottawa in a difficult time in U.S.-Canada relations, with President Donald Trump hitting Canada with tariffs on automobiles, steel, and aluminum, and continuing to hold out the threat of economy-wide fentanyl-related duties. While Mr. Trump has repeatedly claimed Canada should become a U.S. state, Mr. Hoekstra told his confirmation hearing that Canada is a sovereign country. In a statement issued on Wednesday, Mr. Hoekstra said that Canada is America's most valuable trading partner, its largest source of foreign investment, and largest source of energy imports. Independent Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders said he believes President Donald Trump will attempt to run for a third term in office. When asked by CNN's Anderson Cooper whether he believes Mr. Trump is serious about a third term, Senator Sanders said, "Yeah, I do."
But you know what he said about a third term. Do you think he's serious?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think you have somebody whose main function, what he wants is power and wealth for his oligarch friends. So nothing would surprise me about Trump.
President Donald Trump says that Israel would be the leader of a potential military strike against Iran if Tehran doesn't give up its nuclear weapons program. Mr. Trump made the comments on Wednesday ahead of this weekend's scheduled talks involving U.S. and Iranian officials in Oman.
For them. What specifically?
Well, they can't have a nuclear weapon.
Did you mean military action, though, if they don't agree?
Oh, if necessary? Absolutely. Yeah.
And do you have
a deadline for these
Yeah,
talks?
I do.
And
You're talking about with Iran?
Yes.
Yeah, I
they're saying
do.
it's not
Do you want something
definite.
definitive this weekend, or do you see this as the start of a process?
It's a start.
Do you have a timeline?
We have a little time, but we don't have much time
Who is it starting?
because we're not going to let them have a nuclear weapon.
Isn't
Can't
he
let them have a
going to
nuclear
be there, Mr. President?
And we're going to let them thrive. I want them to thrive. I want Iran to be great. The only thing they can't have is a nuclear weapon. They understand that. You know, the people are so incredible in Iran, and they're so smart. They're very smart people. But, you know, they're in a rough situation, rough regime. But they understand, and the leaders understand. And I'm not asking for much. I don't, they can't have a nuclear weapon, and I've said that. And I was a little bit surprised because when the election was rigged, I figured they'd get the weapon because with me, they were broke. They were broke. They had no money because of the sanctions. Nobody could buy oil. We did that to Venezuela just recently. And we'll do it to other countries if we have to.
A growing number of physicians from the United States are looking to move to Canada following the election of President Donald Trump. That's according to the Canadian Medical Association. We spoke to Dr. Joss Reimer, president of the Canadian Medical Association, about how this growing interest could help address key gaps in the Canadian healthcare system, from emergency room wait times to physician burnout.
Well, we have a major issue with a physician shortage in Canada. That's the health human resource shortages are probably some of the biggest problems we have in our health system. We know, according to Health Canada, we're 23,000 family physicians short in this country, and there's no one solution that's going to solve that. But seeing some interest from US physicians wanting to come to Canada is part of the solution, and we need to be putting in every solution that we possibly can at the same time to try to address that gap. And we are seeing interest through the physician recruitment firms, through the Medical Council of Canada. And so we are trying to work with the provinces and with the federal government to hopefully fast track visas and immigration processes and licensure in Canada. When you don't have access to a family doctor, particularly, that can cause all kinds of stresses along the line in your own health and for the system, because either people are getting their primary care in emergency rooms, or they're not getting that care at all and their health needs are getting more complex, and now they actually need those emergency rooms or hospital beds because they weren't taken care of in the community. So we want to make sure we have a strong primary care system that's there for Canadians to keep them healthy and keep them at home.
Dr. Reimer also explained why it's so important to speed up the credentialing process for doctors trained in the U.S. and what challenges still make it hard for them to fully integrate into the system.
It is critical that we make sure that everybody who wants to contribute to our healthcare system in Canada has the opportunity to do that. When we have 6.5 million Canadians who don't have access to a family doctor, we need to be coming up with those solutions. And that means helping those physicians who are already here in Canada to safely practice and contribute to the system. But it also means helping the US doctors who right now are more interested than ever in coming to Canada, helping them get through the immigration process and get their licenses. You have to be licensed in whatever province or territory you work in. And some of the provinces in Canada already fast track US physicians, but not all of them. So we want to see that get expanded so that when US physicians show an interest in Canada, that we can help them get into the system, because their training is quite similar to ours. They're, if they're working in English communities, typically their language is not a barrier. They have a similar culture, although not identical. And so we want to make sure that we're helping get those physicians who could contribute into the workforce as fast as possible.
And finally, we discussed what Canada should do next to not only attract but retain American physicians to help build a more effective Canadian healthcare system.
Well, the thing is, they're already interested in coming. They see Canada as a place where insurance companies and politicians don't get to dictate how you practice medicine. And that's not the truth in the US, where right now there's political interference, and there's been for many, many years insurance company interference in medical decision making. And so we want to show them that this is a great place to work. Yes, we have challenges. There's absolutely things we need to do to improve our system. But one of those challenges is that we don't have enough doctors, so they can be part of the solution and help make this system stronger.
A 19-year-old man has been charged in the firebombing of a Montreal area synagogue in December. The man faces 2 arson-related charges, 2 counts of attempted arson, 1 count of destruction of property, and 1 count of possession of incendiary material. The charges relate to a December 18th fire at the congregation Beth Tikva in a suburb of Montreal, which caused minor damage to the synagogue. Police at the time reported broken glass and damage to the door of the synagogue, as well as smoke damage and a smashed glass door at the nearby Jewish Community Group offices. The Newfoundland and Labrador government is forecasting a $372 million deficit in its budget for the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year, a jump of about $120 million from the previous year. The $11 billion spending plan introduced today sets aside $200 million in a contingency fund to offset potential impacts from U.S. tariffs on Canadian exports imposed by President Donald Trump. But officials say that they did not include the fund in the deficit, and the budget shortfall could widen if any of the $200 million is used. The budget says the province will borrow $4.1 billion in the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year, and its net debt will hit $19.4 billion. Pope Francis met privately with King Charles III and Queen Camilla at the Vatican during the couple's 4-day visit to Italy and on the occasion of their 20th wedding anniversary. It was the first confirmed meeting since the Pope's return to the Vatican after 5 weeks in the hospital for life-threatening double pneumonia. Francis had planned to have an audience with Charles, but that was officially postponed due to the Pope's health. The Pope issued a new invitation for a private audience, but it was only confirmed on Wednesday morning. As the 2025 Masters tournament tees off today at Augusta National Golf Club, excitement is building for the year's first major golf championship. The tournament runs from April 10th to the 13th, with defending champion Scottie Scheffler aiming to secure consecutive victories, a feat not achieved since Tiger Woods in 2001. The tournament field includes 85 players, with Canadian Corey Connors among them. Through the first round, Connors and Scheffler finished at 4 under. LeBron James, one of the most iconic figures in modern sports, has made history once again, this time in the toy aisle. Mattel has announced the release of a new Barbie in Mr. James' likeness, making him the first professional male athlete to be honored as a Ken doll.
Oh, he dope. Oh, that's so cool. This is so dang old cool.
See his promise band?
It's in the baggie. Oh my goodness. Just a kid from Akron, got his Beat headphones. Could take a, oh my goodness, that's dope.
The doll features the Los Angeles Lakers basketball player in his pregame fashion and reflects his height. It's an inch taller than the standard Ken doll. Concerned that Donald Trump's policies might be driving away Canadian tourists, a California resort city has put up signs downtown that say Palm Springs loves Canada. Palm Springs Mayor Ron DeHart said that an estimated 300,000 Canadians visit the Palm Springs region each year, some of them staying for months at a time as they trade Canada's harsh winters for Southern California's reliable warmth. But the mayor said that some Canadians were telling him that they found the U.S. government's tariffs unacceptable. In response, they were canceling their yearly trips and saying that they wouldn't spend a dime in Palm Springs. Mr. DeHart said that he understood that perspective, and he and other local officials were sending a positive message and hoping Canadians would reconsider. I'm Teresa Skupik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca and make sure to follow us on our social media handles on X and TikTok. You can also watch all of our commentary programming on the News Forum YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us on Forum Daily News, and we'll see you next time. Good night, Canada.